Hello guys, how are you all doing? Welcome back to yet another video. Today we are back with the championship content and we're looking at the XG table. Now for those of you guys that don't know what XG is, it's expected goals. Now this is how many chances you create, how good these chances are, and we're looking at a table today which shows how a team should be doing if they could take those chances. So if you see a team high up in this table that aren't high up in the actual table, that goes to show they're not very clinical, and vice versa, if they're low on the XG table but are scoring quite a lot of points, they are quite clinical. It's quite an interesting table to look at. This is calculated on the chances created and the chances created against them to balance it out, and I have added Derby and Reading's points deduction to this table. Before we get into this, like and subscribe, and let's start at the bottom and work our way up. So then we'll start at the bottom with Derby County, Barnsley and Reading. No surprises there, it is three of the bottom four. They're not really creating too much this season. I have added on the points deductions for these. Derby would be bottom. If I hadn't added on the points deduction, then Barnsley would be bottom. Barnsley have the worst projected points based on XG. Goes to show it's quite tight between these teams. Reading as well have added their points deduction on. I think these are all quite a similar level. These three in particular have had little splurges over the season where they've really tried to stay up, and I think Derby County, we know in the real table without points deductions they would be the highest because they've come from so far back with 21 points. To be honest, I think one of these three will survive this season, but I don't know which one. Next up we have Peterborough United, Bristol City and Hull City. Peterborough have the worst XG in terms of creating for themselves, but in some games they've been quite good with the XG, and their XG against isn't always the worst. That's why they would have more points than Barnsley. Anyway, it doesn't surprise me that they're down there with the bottom four. Peterborough have been competitive this season, but ultimately just going to fall short of survival unless they go on a good run towards the end of the season. Hull City and Bristol City in there as well. Yeah, they've both had those kind of seasons where it looks like a bottom half season, but they're both going to stay up. Hull City will be very happy with that as a newly promoted team. Got to say they were clinical against Coventry in the last game I watched them. And Bristol City, I suppose, are higher in the table than they are in this because of Andy Vyman. He's obviously been bagging the goals for them. So, yeah, quite predictable so far. The next three clubs are Blackpool, Birmingham City and Millwall. This surprises me a little bit with a couple of these teams. Blackpool in particular, because they are in reality about mid-table. So they are being quite clinical, really. They've got some good players. Bowler, like I say, he is an absolute gem. Madine's been getting goals. It's quite well spread out at Blackpool, and yeah, they'll be very happy with that. It's not in the bottom six for XG, so that's a positive as well as a newly promoted team. And like I say, one of the best newly promoted teams in a long time. Birmingham City, that sounds about right, doesn't it? They're creating a fair bit and they're finishing a fair bit, and ultimately they're finishing bottom half but not going down. And yeah, they've got decent players, Birmingham City. It's just one of them where it hasn't really clicked this season. And Millwall being 16th, that is quite a surprise because Millwall are actually in reality in the playoff mix. They have been drawing a lot of games this season, and maybe they've been drawing games they could have lost or winning games they should have drawn, so maybe that's why they are higher than the XG says they should be. Just inside the bottom half we have Queen's Park Rangers, Swansea City and Stoke City. With Swansea and Stoke, this doesn't necessarily surprise me. They're both around here in the table, probably going to try and strive for a top half finish come the end of the season, and disappointed for Stoke, okay for Swansea considering their slow start to the season. Swansea have got some clinical players, but speaking of clinical, Queen's Park Rangers 15th, and they've been in the top six for most of this season. That does go to show they are clinical. Now, people on my channel, Cookie being one, have poked holes at teams like this, saying it's not sustainable. If QPR make the top six, then they prove them wrong, but there is something in that. If you're not creating many chances, you might be able to win the odd game, but it is quite hard to sustain. I do think it's the quality at QPR that's kept them in that top six race. Willock, Chair, Austin, they've been banging in goals, and yeah, it's going to be a tight race for top six for QPR, and yeah, their XG says they're doing better than they should be. As we move into the top half, we've got Huddersfield Town, Preston North End and Blackburn. Now, Huddersfield, a bit like QPR you could say, because they've been hanging around third place for quite a while this season, but their XG says they're a mid-table team when it comes to creating chances and chances created against them. So Huddersfield also a very clinical team, and you see that with some of the quality players they've got, and the keeper's obviously been good, the defence as well, so maybe they're letting in less than they probably should be because there have been a lot of chances created against them by the looks of this. Preston North End and Blackburn both in the top half. Preston about mid-table, so it's quite close to where they are. Blackburn being fairly clinical because you can see they're 10th here, and in the real table they're in the top 6. I don't know if Blackburn are going to make the top 6, you know, it's really close. I think Blackburn, they've been faltering a little bit, but I think they've got a favourable run in, so Blackburn could make it, and that'd be a great achievement for Rovers. Just above that then, you've got Nottingham Forest, Luton Town and Cardiff City. I mean, that is a real weird one. We'll come to them in a minute. Nottingham Forest, it's about right, isn't it? They're just outside the playoffs, and they're one of my favourites to actually sneak in there. There's something special. There's a special factor at Nottingham Forest this season. And remember, they're playing catch-up because Chris Hughton really did screw them over in that first 7 or 8 games. So they were bottom. I'm sure their XG would have been pretty low as well. So Steve Cooper's had quite a while, but it is hard in a championship season to really turn it around into a playoff charge, and I really do think Forest could make it. They've picked up some good results lately, and they have been clinical this season. Obviously on an FA Cup run as well, so we'll wait and see what happens with that. Luton Town in 8th place. Just a little bit below where they are in the actual table, but goes to show they're being clinical as well. Luton Town have got some very good players and a very rigid defence. Those results they grind out on the road, 1-0, 2-1, just goes to show that defence can be what might get them the top 6 this season. And then seeing Cardiff City in 7th place, this might be the weirdest one in the XG table. Looks like they create quite a lot of chances, and they don't have all too many chances created against them. But ultimately, they've been in the relegation battle for a lot of this season. They have been improving lately under the new manager. But yeah, 7th place. Maybe it's a sign of good things for Cardiff City next season. Inside the top 6, we've got AFC Bournemouth, Coventry City and West Bromwich Albion. Now, AFC Bournemouth in 6th place. Yeah, in the top 6, but maybe a little bit below where you'd think they should be. But they've got quality to finish chances, haven't they? Very clinical players by the looks of it. Very, very good squad, really. And yeah, the signings they made in January, I do think they will go up if they just keep creating chances. There's not all too long of the season to go. Coventry City, I could rant about this. It does not surprise me to see we should be 5th in the table if XG rang true. Remember, people will say, well, you know, it cancels out wonder goals if you just go on XG and every one-on-one would be scored. Okay, I get that. But yeah, Coventry City, not really going to make the top 6 at this rate, are we? I think even if we get close to it, that'd be a great achievement. But does show good signs for next season that we're creating a lot and sometimes not having all too much created against us. Some teams do just come, get 1 goal and grind out a result, which is always frustrating for the Coventry fans. And West Bromwich Albion in 4th place, I'm a little bit surprised by this because it shows they're not very clinical, but you'd think with the quality players that they've got, they should be. Carlin Grant's been alright for them this season, he's been scoring goals, but West Bromwich Albion, they puzzle me sometimes. So then the top 3 for XG in the Championship are Middlesbrough, Sheffield United and Fulham Football Club. We'll come to Fulham at the end because there's no surprises there, but Middlesbrough and Sheffield United, brilliant stuff from them. They're both in a very similar position at the moment. Slow start to the season, new manager, charging towards the playoffs. I'd be surprised if they both missed out on the top 6. Ultimately, one of them might, because how many teams are actually trying to cram their way into the top 6. But these two both would feel aggrieved if they didn't. Middlesbrough have obviously been brilliant under Chris Wilder, brilliant at home, and they picked up a decent away result at Birmingham City recently. So, decent players. They're doing just a little bit worse than they should be by the looks of it. Maybe not as clinical as they should be at times, but we'll wait and see how Middlesbrough finish. They could get in that top 6 ultimately. And Sheffield United creating quite a bit, but defence maybe letting them down and the forwards letting them down sometimes. I don't know with Sheffield United, but I also ultimately think they should make the top 6 as well. And then Fulham top, it really doesn't surprise me. I think they're the only team in here that are actually where they are in the real table, because Fulham, they're just brilliant on all the metrics and stats, aren't they? They create a lot, they score a lot, they don't concede many chances, they don't concede many goals. So, yeah, it's just a flawless season from Fulham, and they're going back to the Premier League, aren't they? So then, guys, that wraps up today's video. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. As a Coventry fan, just doesn't surprise me that we're not very clinical. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.